Hey guys and gals, it's Mr. Know-It-All here, and I've got to share something with you on this beautiful Pensacola day. Alright, we're getting ready to pour some more concrete. We're going to have a few leaves in this one, I'm afraid. We got that one poured, and that one poured, and we're pouring this one. Hey guys and gals, if you get a chance, go to the comments section anytime throughout the video and share with us your worst or your best concrete story that you've had to deal with in your life or you know about. Alright, I want to give this to you. It's probably our longest video we've ever done, and the big part of it is you'll see a lot of different parts of the pour. It was over 100 yards. We poured it between 5 and 6 inches thick. We used that tool right there, the Vibra-Strike. We poured the pad in front of the small storage barns we had put in. And there's another piece that was poured right there. We used wire. We drilled and pinned all of the concrete that we poured up to each other. And we used expansion where we touched other concrete. We also learned to use some really good tape along the edge to protect the concrete that was poured from getting slop on it, because it doesn't look good. The concrete truck's getting ready to show up. There it is right now. And I have to give you some pointers on that. We used one of the best supposedly concrete companies out there, and we talked to the batch manager at the plant, letting them know how much we were going to pour and that we needed front discharge trucks because it's just me and my secretary doing this. I've poured probably 100,000 yards in my lifetime from our concrete business, and we needed front discharge trucks, not the one you see me using right now, because we're limited. And the front discharge, the driver can control the chute. So not only did we get let down on the fact they showed up with an unexperienced driver who had never poured concrete out of a truck before. He was an asphalt driver and then started working for this company, which was a bummer, because when you're pouring with just two people, one experienced and one not very well experienced, it makes it very tough. And you can see him standing on my form. That is not something you want to see happen. And it's kind of agitating because you're paying $130 a yard for this concrete. You've got pipes coming up, drainage pipes from the gutters going into the concrete so that it drains off when it rains. We had all the best tools we could get, Vibra-Strikes and best poles and the best bull floats, but he didn't make it any easier, because I had to control the chute, put the concrete where I needed it, and still try to get a beautiful job done on it. So make sure you sit down with your batch plant manager, who's actually going to be sending the drivers out, and tell them explicitly, and have them put it down, write it down, have them sign it, do something, because this was just totally made our job even harder to do, even with the tools we had. So we're pouring a 4,000 pound mix with fiber mesh in it, with wire, and pouring it extra thick because we have a huge motorhome that's going to be driving on it. We had a bucket truck, Boomzilla, you remember that. That's going to be driving on it. So it was really tough when they didn't show up with what they promised us they'd do. So just keep watching. But again, we're going to be jumping around a lot between different pours. There's no set pour that we did, and I'm going to try to give you as many pointers as I possibly can so that it'll help you pour this. But if you haven't poured a lot of concrete, make sure you have a lot of people there to help you, because you should have, you know, back when we had our concrete business, we had 35 guys and gals working for us. We'd have somebody pulling the wire up, we'd have somebody, you know, running the edges, we'd have somebody bull floating, we'd have somebody, you know, 2 people, one on each side of the Vibrastrike, pulling the mud back with their come-alongs, and it makes your job a lot easier. I pretty much had to do all that. My secretary there, she did not get into the mud because I didn't want her, you know, getting in the mud and walking all over the new concrete that she's standing on right now. With this one here, having pipes to go around that are coming down out of the power box on the wall for the generator pad, 2 drains in the pad going around the palm tree, all that. It was pretty tough. And so we only poured maybe about 3 to 4 yards every pour. So we actually paid a minimum load charge on every pour we did, and it was still, we still saved thousands and thousands of dollars from our original quote that we had from a contractor, few contractors, to pour it. And the truck drivers don't help you pull mud. He's grabbing that come along, and he actually didn't make it any easier because he's never done concrete before. We did it when it was cooler outside here in January and the beginning of February, and then it actually got to the point where it got a little chillier and we had to start running chloride in it. And of course, if you know anything about chloride in your concrete, once the sun hits it, that stuff starts getting hard pretty quick. So I'm trying to get the mud out of there as fast as I can and get it struck off, flattened out. The Vibrastrike, we had an 8-foot Vibrastrike and a 12-foot Vibrastrike. You can't really use it running it over concrete, so I was trying to get it between the pad that the secretary's standing on and the pad for the generator. I had to use a 2x4, and I had an aluminum strike bar too, or as well. So they lift the chute up so he can swing it out of the way. I'm pulling the wire up into it. And it was about a year ago we poured all this, and there's not a crack in that concrete. We poured over some of it, a good portion of it was over existing concrete, so that worked out pretty good. We had a good solid base, and then we used red clay and sand to get a good base, and we compacted it like crazy. And the funny part of it all is, and I'll say this, many of these things I'll repeat over and over, but the funny part was we bought all the tools when they were pretty much dirt cheap before everything started going up in price, as you well know. And I think it was right around $3,000 for all the tools. We ended up selling all the tools to a guy from Louisiana on Craigslist for $700 more than we paid for all the tools. So that's a pretty good deal. We couldn't do that now because now shipping and all that is, you know, just to get one Vibrastrike now is $200 in shipping, where back when we bought those there was no shipping charge, it was free. So what I'm trying to do right now is get it smoothed out up by the wall and around those pipes with my magnesium float, knowing that I'm not going to be able to get back to that area anytime soon. And if I don't close it up and make it smooth, it'll never look good. And of course, in where we're at, from where the secretary is at the garage to where the driveway ended at the far left, we ended up with about a foot of fall. So the water, the rain that we get here is torrential sometimes. So we just had to make sure that it all ran off. I did not want any puddles in the concrete. And see, the driver's trying to help because he feels bad. I kind of let him have it a little bit about why I don't have a front discharge truck. And the batch manager promised me that that's all I would get. I made it explicitly clear I could not have a rear discharge truck. In Michigan, they don't have those trucks. And that's where we poured the majority of our concrete when I had my business. Now we did get it poured, so here we go, pouring the approach coming out of the fenced area. And the front part of it is about a foot thick with rebar, number 4 bar in it, and wire. So that's the edge that will sink or crack when you ride up on it with a heavy vehicle. So we poured it extremely thick. And then in front of the truck there, that's all railed off, that's about 5.5 inches thick. And you can see the truck is sitting on the concrete because there's existing concrete there. So I'll just let you watch this for a little bit. It's pretty interesting. I'll speed some areas up. But you see this next pour here that we did, we had a front discharge truck. Would I hire this company again? Absolutely not. Alright, now I'll share some pictures with you on what that area looks like that we're getting ready to pour. And the concrete was all busted up and not in good shape. But I'm sure some of you are wondering, how did we attach the forms here when we had a existing concrete driveway here? Well, what you do is you set your 2x4s or 2x6s on their face on the concrete, and sometimes you have to double stack them if you got a lot of slope to your concrete, and then you Hilti screw them into the concrete and attach them to the concrete. And then you put your face board, which is the one the concrete will pour up to, you set that for your level with your laser level. And I highly suggest, if you do any amount of concrete, use a laser level. All these tools will be in the show more of the video's description. Julio's on vacation, so.
Buscar en el show más de la descripción de video para todas las herramientas.
Now what I'm doing is filling this thing up, and like I said, it's at least a foot thick right there. If it's ever going to crack or bust, it's going to be when you first enter onto concrete or you exit off of it. So we're filling that thing up, and there's a lot of rebar, and I put wire in it, plus it has fiber mesh in it. And you see how he's pouring the concrete in there? So much easier doing it with this chute. It's hydraulically run, which many of you know. Now there's a form that's right in front of that towards the truck that I just used to be able to strike the concrete off. So we'll fill that up, I'll strike it off, and then I have it set with duplex nails nailed into the poles of the fence, and I'll pull that board out so that I can come and use the VibraStrike going from left to right all the way across. But this way I have something to strike off of. Otherwise, if I didn't have that board in there, I wouldn't be able to strike it off or make it level. Now you can see where the palm tree is on the left, and you see the curve in that. I used Luan and cut it in strips. I cut it tall, about 8 inches tall. Use that because that's the only way you can really get a good curve in it. Now I'm using an aluminum bar over there to strike that off, and you can see I'm going off two forms about 3 feet apart from each other. The front face form, which is towards closest to the secretary there, and then the other form that's to the right of me. And then I'll pull that one out and he'll fill it in, and I'll strike it off with the Vibra Strike. But you see how nice the concrete's coming out. It took us about a month and 2 weeks roughly, because I had to do the excavation, I had to do the compacting, I had to do the grading, I had to put the forms in. And it wasn't just like nailing, you know, hammering stakes into the ground to put your forms in. I had to Hilti the boards to the concrete and then take them back out. And I reused them, so it didn't cost me a lot to do that. And any extra concrete they had, if we had extra, make sure you always order a 1/4 yard extra or more. We had him poured out onto the existing concrete there where his front tires are at, and we just spread it out there. Spread it out nice, and we didn't waste a bit. We used every bit of concrete that came our way. And again, I'll say I've had some heavy trucks on that, and there's not a crack in that concrete. Your subgrade is so important, and then using fiber mesh and wires, probably a little bit overkill, but we were using a really high PSI concrete as well. And it was for our house, it was for our home. We wanted the best that we could do, and we knew we were saving tens of thousands of dollars doing it ourselves, because down here in Pensacola, they charge an arm and a leg to do anything, any kind of contracting or any kind of work. So that's why we have Mr. Know-It-All to share some of this stuff with you. So let's speed it up here a little bit, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. I added a few pictures in here. You can see how bad it was cracked up there. We came inside the fence towards the stone about 3 feet more and poured all that really thick. Now this one right here shows another picture of it, and then we went with tons of rebar and tons of rod or wire as well. Now this next one is the forms we screwed down to the concrete, and it worked great with 2x6s, lasered them in. When it comes to the narration of this, that part that we just poured is already done, and we'll jump back to that. I'll show you some more pictures and all that stuff of it. But right here we just poured this next section, and the secretary is crawling on a piece of styrofoam, which is really good for your knees. If you don't have knee boards, it's really good for your knees. You don't wear them out and all that stuff. And I'm over here, and I take my boots off out there and I put my slippers on, but you'll never see anybody else out here but the two of us. That's the way it is. But what she's doing is edging the concrete. She made my life a lot easier doing some of the fine detailing. But along the edge there, we have that really good tape, duct tape, and that'll be in the tools list as well. And it really worked well. It worked great. Because if you got a little bit up on the new concrete that she's, you know, kneeling on right there, you didn't have to worry about it. I kind of had a little bit of a reputation to try to keep up the quality that I did for years and years and years in Michigan. And if you're wondering how I'm holding that mag on my belt loop there, it's they call it a mag hook. That'll be in the tools list as well. But what I'm doing is cleaning the concrete off of the form that I hilted into the concrete, the existing concrete down there, so that I can get the screws out after the concrete hardens up. Now you'll see behind the secretary there, all that concrete, That's washout stuff. Any extra we spread out on that. So that concrete's at least 6 inches thick, the whole pour. And we got really good slope on it, so the water all runs right off. Now we are getting to the point where the weather is actually getting warmer. I think maybe middle of January, end of January, it's starting to get warmer. And now what I'm doing is I'm putting some concrete into some low spots before I finish bull floating it. Bull floating it, as you would say. So I'll be bull floating that in and filling up any low spots, any little tiny holes. You'll see a pile over there on the left hand side by where the secretary's walking. There's a pile right out there in front of her, and she's putting a little along the edge, and she'll edge that in so that the edges all come up flush to each other. Now I'm starting to bull float, but it's starting to warm up, as I was saying, and with that the concrete will set up a little bit faster. But then what happens is, if we get any rain and the subgrade gets wet or any of that, we'll start using chloride. And if I remember, I think this pad had a 0.5% of chloride in it, accelerator. But I got enough poles. I think I got I don't know, 24 foot worth of poles for the bull float. And I had a Fresno, which is a steel trowel that could go on the poles as well. And down here in Florida, you don't have to worry about the top of the concrete spalling off or peeling off the top when it freezes, because it doesn't get cold down here. Now up in Michigan, you would want to bull float it and brush it and call it good. And the air and train concrete up there helps the concrete to not peel off the top. Have you ever seen concrete peel off the top up in cold weather where they get snow? It's because the water's trapped in the top of the concrete. It freezes and it pops off. So they use air entrainment, which are little millions of little tiny bubbles in the concrete to allow the water to move in the concrete, so it doesn't do that. We don't have to do that here. Now I remember when I was pouring concrete, you know, a few years back, it was 65 bucks a yard. I think we were paying 120 some dollars a yard here. Now, like I said, it's way higher than that, just in 2 years. So as I'm going over this, you'll see me hit that spot where it's piled up on the left there. I'm coming up to it right now, and I'm going to hit it right now, and I'll crank that up and push that down in there. There was a low spot there, but we had them we asked numerous times for large limestone, and the larger the aggregate that's in the concrete, the stronger the concrete is. And you see me shaking the bull float there. That's to kind of work up some cream in that area. I have to put more in there. The hole's not filled. But we asked for the largest stone they had, 1 to 2 inch, I think, in limestone, because we wanted our drive to be really white and beautiful. So that's what we were looking for. And a couple of loads came with small limestone in it. It was just no organization. And then a lot of the problem, and I'll mention it a few times through here, is even though it was just her and I doing this, they showed up on time one time out of 12 pours. And sometimes they made us wait almost 2 hours. So what I like to do is get it poured at 9 o'clock in the morning, get it all laid down before it started to warm up. Well, sometimes they wouldn't show up till 11, and we'd call them, and oh, they're on their way, and all that stuff. And I'm not just here complaining about it, but when you have, you know, $1,000 worth of concrete in a truck, or 750 bucks worth of concrete in a truck, and they batch it, and it's in the truck, you own it. So if you can't get it out of there, or you can't get it laid down, or you mess it up in your drive when you're pouring it, that's your baby. So I really wanted to, you know, go down there and tell them, listen, you guys aren't doing anything that I asked you to do. And I thought, well, you're just going to make it worse. They're just going to... So I thought, well, we're just going to buck up and put my tail between my legs a little bit and just get it done.
Bend over and take out the tailpipe!
And thank God that I had the experience to be able to deal with some of this stuff. You know, showing up late and the concrete's, they'd get caught in something, or they didn't get from another job, or we'd call them and they'd say another contractor ran short, so they had to take him another yard of concrete. Kind of like playing blackjack next to somebody and they don't take a hit when they should. If you're going to take a hit on 15, you take a hit every time on 15, that type of thing. But overall, it's absolutely beautiful, and we built it strong, and we took a lot of pictures of the wire and the rebar and all that, so if we ever sell our home, we'll be able to show the new owners, because you know, a lot of people, oh, it's got all this stuff in it for reinforcement, but we have pictures of it. And to hire somebody, the one quote I got was $70,000 to pour that, the whole drive, and you'll see the finished drive at the end. But you know what, doing it ourselves, we knew exactly what was in it, we knew exactly what the mix was, we knew exactly how much wire was in it, the fiber mesh was in it, all that stuff. And that's the good thing about doing it yourself. Now, one thing you'll see I'm taking off with the bull float, every time you're done using a tool, have a bucket of water to rinse it off in or spray it off. Even if you're pouring, make sure you have a hose handy to spray that stuff off, because it doesn't take very long to dry on your tools, and then you're in trouble, because then you got to scrape it off quick, get it out there. The whole idea is to get it done and finished out, you know, before it hardens up on you and you can't do anything with it. Once that happens, then you better get your sliders or your knee boards on and get out there with a mag and a hand trowel and start swatting it out. So we'll speed this up a little bit, and you can see the secretary is getting a little more mud there to bring up to the edge. Like I said, you want to have the edge of the concrete where it meets up to the other concrete completely flat across that area. Alright, what I'm doing right now is I'm actually doing the last step, which is Fresnoing with a steel trowel. That is the last thing you will do, and that smooths out all your ridges from bull floating. And it's what I do last before brushing. Alright, I thought I'd throw a little more narration in on this one right here. Now what we're doing is waiting to Fresno it out or steel trowel it out. And you can see the tool laying on the new concrete there, the old new concrete. That is the brush. And we're waiting it out. We're basically waiting for the moisture to come off the concrete so we can brush it. And it's pretty simple to do as far as that concerned, but if it's too wet, you'll pull too much cream off the top. If it's too dry, you won't get it to close up and look nice. So what will happen is I have poles long enough to reach from one side. The secretary will grab the brush and walk down and set the brush at the edge of the concrete, and I will pull it towards the neighbor's house. And what I'm doing is checking it. I'm just waiting around. All the tools are cleaned up and washed up. This is the part that sometimes can keep you at a job site for a long time, because you're waiting for it to get to that perfect texture on top so you can brush it and make it look good. And a lot of times when you brush it, you'll pull cream into the edges and you got to go re-edge it again. So right now what I'm going to do is touch up a few areas while I'm waiting that need to be perfected, and I'm using a steel trowel. I only had to get on one piece of concrete with knee boards, and that's when the driver was really late and the mud was really hot, and you'll see that later on in the video. But it takes the patience of Job to do this, especially when you're by yourself, and it will be probably, by the way that concrete looks there, if I remember right, another hour and a half before it's ready to brush. When the wind's not blowing, it takes longer to dry up, and now the sun's starting to hit it. That will help tremendously. Alright, we have another truck backing up. As you can see, it is a rear discharge truck again. Now they started feeling bad about it, so they sent 2 drivers. And they're going to try to help us out by doing that, which neither one of them knows anything about concrete. It's just one of those things. It's hard to find people who do what they say and say what they do. So we're going to pour the section you see there. Now I'm walking by the Vibra-Strike right there. I just stepped over it. That is a tremendous tool. I can't say enough about it. So what they're going to do is have one of the drivers is experienced and the other one isn't. So they're going to try to help out by moving the chute for me. Now you see the forms that I have there. The outside form closest to the grass is held up by stakes in the dirt, and the other one is done with the screwing into the concrete with the board and then screwing the board to that board, if you know what I mean. And the far side over by the grass there, that's any edge is weak. Any edge of concrete is weak, so you need to reinforce it with rod, more wire. And in that right there, I made it about a foot deep, and I put a footing in there, actually like a footing, it's deep. I dug a trench along the whole side of that driveway, and I put half-inch rebar in it, two rows of it, with double wire. So that'll never snap off there. I mean, I can't really put enough weight on this driveway. But if I had my crew here from back in the day, I would have probably 7 or 8 people here, 7 or 8 workers, and we would pour the whole driveway in one pour. But we're in no hurry. We're out to save a ton of cash, and that's what we're doing. So I'll speed this up a little bit. You'll see how the Vibra-Strike works. Because I'm by myself, I'll have to stop Vibra-Striking, go up, move the Vibra-Strike up, hit it again. They're not meant to pull concrete back. They're made to level it out and help strike it off flat. As I mentioned before, usually you have one person on each side of you going back with you, pulling the extra mud, the extra concrete that's there out of the way, so that you can just keep Vibra-Striking one swat, and you're done. Vibra-Strike it, bull float it, Fresno it, wait it out, brush it. Done. So now they're going to back up and try to reach all the way up here in this corner where the red bucket is. And you can see the black tape that I told you about. We put that down, and our edges of our concrete that was already poured really turned out beautiful. But my secretary there, she'll pull the mud up to the edge, but she'll never get in the mud because she's got to walk on the new stuff like I mentioned. And there's a garden hose laying out, ready to go, to spray the tools off, and that's another one of her jobs. Watch a little bit of the pouring going on, and like I said, for outdoor concrete, about a 5.5 to 6 inch slump. Now he's spraying the chute down so that the concrete will flow out of there easier. Now if we would have had wet concrete around there where his hose just went crazy, it would have messed up the concrete brushing. We would have had to go over it again. That's just inexperienced drivers. Alright, the mud's going to start coming out right now, and I'm going to take a look at it and see if it's wet enough or if it's too dry, and I'll check it out and then they'll either give it another drink of water or we'll go with it. So it's obviously fairly decent. And now he's got that chute, it's just pouring out of there way too fast. It should never lump up like that. He's got it coming out of there way too fast. That's an inexperienced driver. And see, the driver in the front can't see what we're doing here. And we're pouring it slightly dry compared to where we normally do, but that chute should never be that full. Way too much. That's what makes it irritating. Because all that mud's got to be pulled down. It's all got to be flattened out. And the front discharge driver can see what he's doing and lay that mud in there just about the thickness you need. This is a joke. I was pretty agitated, and it's really hard. I'm pretty mad at this time. Now I got to pull all that mud down. I'm not complaining. I know it sounds like I am, but you just deal with it.
Bend over and take it up the tailpipe!
And my main thing is just get it done and get that truck out of there. But those come-alongs work really, really good. Way better than using a flat shovel. And I'm pushing it up to the edge. Pull it along the edge. Make sure you kind of turn the blade on an angle so you're like a snowplow. You're pulling it away from the edge and not letting the concrete go over your new concrete. Alright, we have a new truck showing up right now, front discharge. This was probably one of the better pours that we did. This driver knew what he was doing. I think he was on time. Viber strike is setting and ready to grab a hold of. All the tools are out and ready to go. I've got a wheelbarrow over there to put any extra concrete in. Usually when you're pouring, you want to get a wheelbarrow load of concrete so that you can fill in holes or low spots. And while we sprayed all the forms down, we used all the same lumber over and over and over and over again. We just used diesel fuel in a garden sprayer and sprayed all the forms down with diesel fuel. And if you pay cash, a lot of times you will get a better price on the concrete. But we're getting near the end. We've got 2 more pours to do. I'll speed this up so you can kind of get an idea what's going on, and I'll narrate it if need be. Alright, I wanted to add this in there. This was not our last 2 pours. We had to do one small one in order to reach from the driveway, the existing asphalt driveway. We didn't want him driving over the edge of the asphalt, busting it all off, so we had to make one small pour, which is this one right here. The next pour is the one that went really bad. Concrete came out great, but... And you see the circle around the palm tree? Real simple to do that. All you got to do is grab some of that heavy-duty landscape edging and just put it in there and use wooden stakes and deck screws to hold it where you want it, and you can do circles or curves or whatever you want to do. Few more of the pours out here, but kind of a little collage of pouring that we did. But if there's any pointers I can give you that are most important when you pour your own concrete, meet the batch manager or the plant manager and get it in writing. I may have already said this, but get it in writing exactly what you're going to get. Make sure you get the batch slips for each pour, each truckload of concrete, so you can see exactly what they're giving you. Make sure you look at the stone, make sure it's exactly what you ordered, and make them hold to showing up on time, because that's crucial when you're trying to pour, especially in warm weather. Now this pour here kind of was the worst pour of all. I thought it was the other one that the secretary's standing on, but it was this one here. The truck was 2 hours late and the mud was on fire, no matter how much water he gave it, and the concrete didn't match, which tells me that they had concrete left over in the truck from another pour in order to get there on time. But you see the little ramp I put in front of the asphalt there with the clay to keep them from busting the asphalt. And I cut the asphalt with a partner saw, nice and clean, and I dug underneath the asphalt about 3 to 4 inches back, and that whole edge is really deep. Your edges and your approaches need to be really thick, that way you don't snap them off. And use rod. You can see the rod to my right sitting on the concrete. That's for that web right there. And I'll actually lay those long pieces right into the big slab so that that thing never busts. But that's about 10 inches thick, that web. Don't be afraid to pour it extra thick. And then we had the advantage of having the skid steer there, so on the last truck that poured there, we were able to have them wash out one final time instead of into the driveway, but in the bucket. And then I disposed of it on the property in the appropriate place. But this is one of the best pours, and they had two guys there because they really felt bad at that time because they kept sending us these junk rear discharge trucks. And 2 people pouring is, that's why we wanted and went with this company, because they had front discharge trucks. They were the only ones with them. And we got the front discharge trucks maybe about 25% of the time. Well, you can see the concrete that the secretary's standing on. It was a sandy color when it dried up. It didn't match any of the others. But just watch what we're doing and enjoy it. Thank you guys. If you have any questions on it or anything like that, make sure you let Mr. Know-It-All know. you.